Oh man.
So did you? I know Thunderfoot made a lot of videos criticizing Anita Sarkeesian's work. Did you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on her work or the critiques she was
Well,
doing?
of course I didn't like her. Like almost everyone back then didn't like her. I didn't like most people who were bored with this. I think we genuinely thought that she was sort of something nasty, right? I don't know how you felt about it, that she was sort of intruding into a sphere that wasn't hers and trying to cut it up.
That wasn't my perception necessarily. I mean, obviously, there's the clip of her, saying that, "Oh, I'm not a gamer," and like she did, as we now know, use footage from other people's gameplay footage for her channel and try to pass it off as hers. So I'm not even
Have
sure
you
she
have you
played most of these
noticed
games that she criticized. But
have you noticed how a lot of the people who whined at her for that, who made videos calling her out for that, a lot of the people now do the exact same thing.
what
They're,
plagiarism?
they're all, no, they're all media critics now. Everyone is now a fucking media critic, but it's all cultural stuff. It's not really anything of value in any real politics.
Well, let's talk about
Yeah.
the culture war. So I was also involved with the culture war aspect. I got involved with GamerGate in 2015 for creative freedom reasons. I was concerned about basically the
Hmm.
censorship of games, what I was perceived as the closing of the Overton window for artists, basically, and certain pressure campaigns. Like if you, I don't know if you remember ChangeTheCover at all in comics.
I don't actually remember.
Okay.
Jeez.
All right. Well, basically, it was a campaign by some people to change the Batgirl number 41, I believe it was, the variant cover, because it portrayed the Joker holding the Batgirl hostage with a gun to her head. And people thought that this was alluding to the Killing Joke, which I think it was alluding to the Killing Joke. Um, for like they're doing like a Joker anniversary special or whatever. So a bunch of different DC comics had Joker variant themed covers.
Yeah.
And some people took offense to this because they thought that the Joker had it's implied in the Killing Joke comic that the Joker had sexually assaulted Batgirl, and so they thought that by making this Batgirl variant cover related to this very terrible moment in Batgirl's life was wrong or promoted sexual assault.
Mhm.
It was kind
The
of silly.
main thing that I remember was sort of the case that was made against Zoe Quinn.
Oh,
Um, yeah, that is the one thing that I remember mostly because I remember seeing all that as it was being presented to me and thinking, "Oh wow, this is just what happened to our atheist community back in the day." Um, and that is what drove me very deep into it. But and then I kind of fell down this sort of pipeline where I started to see that sort of stuff, that sort of what I guess what is now called wokeness everywhere, where you deliberately went out of your way to look for it, to call it out, etc. But yeah,
so
man, you're really stumping me.
well, so you okay? So we can talk about Zoe Quinn and the parallels you saw at the time. I guess real quick, if you have anything you want to.
I don't know anything about the comic, the Batman
Okay,
comic. I don't even read comics. I have to be honest with you.
I
So
don't really anymore. I picked one up the other day, but I've not read it yet.
yeah, it's been a weird 10 years ever since all of this went down. Like I think initially some of the people who started all of this, I mean, it all morphed eventually into what I guess we could now call the anti woke movement or the anti SJW movement, if you can even call it that, which I was then part of for like 2 years from 2015 to 2017 as a YouTuber myself. But looking back at it, it's just something that has gone, even though some of the people may have had some legitimate grievances at some point, it's turned into something that I regard as largely negative.
Okay. I don't think I disagree. So the culture war. Is there any point to any of this
No,
stuff in your view?
no. Like I've gone on to study history and political science, and there's this remarkable thing that happened recently in Germany, which I thought about putting into a video, but I'm worried that it might attract culture warriors. But it's sort of a really an excellent example of how useless cultural politics is. I'll give you that example. I think it's a really good one. So Germany is a federal republic like the United States, right? the difference between the US and Germany is that in Germany, the subdivisions have more power than in the US, meaning the German version of the states have a lot more autonomy. They have a lot more political saying power than the federal government in Berlin. And that means there's a lot of bureaucracy that can be created due to the interplay between the various institutions of the various different 16 states. And because of that, if you make laws that contradict laws in other states, right? If you do something drastically different than it is done in another state, it can create a mountain of paperwork and nonsense. And recently we had this sort of weird culture war politics come to Germany, especially throughout the last 2 years. And left wing states started legislating into law that neo pronouns exist. And right wing states started legislating that there are only two genders for forms that you have to, for example, fill out with the state, etc., and tax forms, etc. And the only thing that this in the end created is just more paperwork and more bureaucracy because you now have the different interlays between the different states, put different genders and different pronouns and different blah blah blah. So that's, in my opinion, a great example of how useless cultural politics is. It just, it creates problems where there are no problems. It gives you the illusion that you're actually helping, I guess, that you're actually doing something useful when in reality you're not doing anything.
Well, I do want to ask you about paperwork too. Actually, that's because your Estonia video was really interesting, but that's much later. So let's to play the other side real quick here. People obviously have different ideas about like what should exist in media, what kind of media they
Hmm.
personally want to create and consume. People have different ideas about like what the culture, quote unquote, should be. And like people are always going to be like debating and hashing out these conversations. Like, okay, you know what? Maybe this cultural practice in our society is good, or maybe it's bad, or we could change it in that way, or maybe this is a new habit we should adopt as a society, not
Hmm.
political, not government, but just cultural things. And like I don't know if that's like illegitimate for people to talk about those things. I don't think it is necessarily.
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it is illegitimate. I just think that social media added a sort of dimension to it that we might not even fully grasp yet. Where we might not even like it's stunning to me how much people think they're actually genuinely doing something useful politically when they tweet, even though it is the single most useless form of political engagement there is. It's not even political in many ways.
Well, you say when people tweet, but like you're a content creator, you have almost 600,000
Yeah.
subscribers. You presumably make tweets too, and this like plays some role in you promoting your work, and
Mhm.
that work presumably changes people's minds on
Yes, yes.
topics, right?
But I don't tell my audience that they're part of a movement, that they're part of something that will change society. I try to largely teach people the stuff that I've learned in my studies. And there's a big difference in that. There's a very big difference in that. If you look at the old videos that we made back in the day, when, well, not necessarily you, you may have not even been part of this, but like the videos that I made back in 2016 were largely like these very, they were like, I genuinely believed that I was part of something bigger than me then. And I genuinely believe that the people who were watching me and were commenting under my videos believed that they was part of something bigger than just themselves. That we were part of a genuine political movement changing things. I remember having conversations with Sargon back in the day about how we were going to change politics, which is, frankly, looking back, just delusional. We were completely delusional. Yeah.
Well, he did run for office and lost, so there's that.
Yeah.
So
There's that.
I was also I was a GamerGate YouTuber first and foremost. I made probably hundreds of videos about GamerGate, but I would also occasionally talk about politics, and I'd made some culture war videos too. I'm more anti-SJW leaning, but like more like free speech, I guess, oriented. Like what I was focused on was like the culture war in video games, insofar as I talked about it. And there were a lot of like different like articles, like there was one for Vice Waypoint, if you remember them. I'm not even sure they exist anymore. But they argued that Cindy from Final Fantasy, was it 15, should be censored, I think. Basically, they argued because they said that it was she was one loose thread away from indignity, and you'd think that Square would have seen this and changed it, or seen the backlash to it and changed it. So
Mhm.
they were like kind of soft, encouraging censorship. So like I would make videos like criticizing stuff like that usually.
I got to ask you this because this is something that I had a conversation with an old GamerGator maybe a year or two ago as well, and he said like the feeling that he got in retrospect is that people like Sargon and Co just jumped onto their grievances and tried to milk money out of it. In
Um,
retrospect,
that's a complicated. There were people who did that. I don't know about Sargon specifically. I did know Sargon at the time. We actually talked quite a bit. Not every couple months we'd or every few weeks we'd set up a stream or talk or something like that, right? About stuff that was happening. But I don't know if he was like a true believer, quote unquote, or not, or if he
oh, he
was
is.
just
He
a
is.
grifter. I don't, I can't. At the time, I thought he was genuine. But in retrospect,
It's
look
with
at
how
where he's
right
going
wing it
since.
became, right?
Well,
Isn't it? It's
today
weird how
he's gone down
he's
a really
extreme.
weird dark path that
Yeah.
obviously I don't endorse.
It. I can tell you from being in his private DM group for like 2 years that that shift really just gradually happened. It's like looking back, it's like really weird to think about it. But he started out as sort of this Bernie Sanders socked them, and over the course of 2 3 years, he turned into this like ardent right winger. It was really fucking weird to watch.
Yeah, I don't.
I took
Is that
time.
audience capture or like what is that like?
I think he changed his political outlook and beliefs, but it's weird how extreme they became. It's like this idea that he has to go out there and fight wokeness sort of consumed him to the point that it shapes his entire political outlook, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, honestly in what 20 like 2016, 2017, 20 up until like relatively up until like a few years ago, up until COVID, I guess. I was also like pretty concerned with like wokeness, quote unquote. And I guess like I still am because I think that there are very like bad things that happen
I don't
that
care
these
at all
people
anymore.
engage in. Yeah, like they like they're like so. For instance, we just saw with like I'm not sure if you follow like the Sweet Baby Inc. controversy, but like a lot of these games journalists did end up lying about the situation about what happened and misrepresented events. And
Mhm.
you do see that like that specific controversy was started because a social justice person, um, which again they're entitled to their viewpoints, but then they engaged in harassment against somebody, and like obviously they shouldn't be doing that. But then at the same time, after that controversy happened, you had a couple of instances where the anti-SJW people now in gaming, they also decided to behave unethically and started lying about somebody I know actually, E. Zhang, who I interviewed,
Mhm.
and so yeah, it's just both sides. I don't care like what their specific cultural views are personally. I just care how they like behave and how they act in the world, and I would think that they should behave ethically and not be dishonest, not lie about people, not misrepresent events, and should try to like engage in dialogue and discussion and talk with people who disagree with them. That's what I want to see happen. So like that's where I'm at with the culture war. Like I think the culture war stuff's pretty dumb personally, but there are like bad things that people are doing in the name of the culture war on both
Mhm.
sides, and I think that should be called out.
Yeah, the thing that I have sort of I'm in a very luxurious position compared to you, I guess, to many others, which is that I had to sort of rebuild my social media presence from scratch, and the thing that I've learned doing that is if you just ignore these people, like you can just ignore these people. At least that's what I'm doing. Yeah, I ignore them. I completely ignore them. I pretend they're not real. I pretend they don't exist. And whenever they try to drag me into what it is that they are complaining about, be it the right wing culture warriors or the left wing quote unquote woke warriors, I just ignore both sides of them because I'm not interested. I'm really not interested in getting dragged into this. And yeah, I think that is genuinely the advice that I would give to most people concerning this entire thing. Ignore these people. They're not as relevant as you think you are. They are.
So to push back a little bit, right? So you push back on it either way, I guess. But let's just like choose like the more like
Mhm.
anti-CW one for now. So someone might say, okay, look, I understand you to say ignore them. Hey, look, these people, they're assholes. Who cares? You know, but they do have some influence on the world, right? You do see in academia, for instance. For instance, there's a conference coming up, a GamerGate conference, quote unquote, and I interviewed the organizers of this conference, Paul Jaussen and Stephen Mallory, and their whole conference basically is them talking about of talking about how GamerGate's bad, even though they only have one side presented at the conference.
Why are they even talking about it 10 years later? It's so weird that people
So
keep.
they
Yeah.
say they say that they want to. Well, supposedly the thing is that they want to supposedly revisit it and see what they can learn from it, right? But they only invited anti-Gamergate people, and like there's a few people who might be
Mm.
neutral, possibly, but they don't have anyone on the other side at all represented. Now, they did talk with me, I guess, later, to be fair, but the conversation did not like instill me with like a great deal of confidence that their
It
conference is
feels
going to
it
be
feels
great.
like it feels like beating a dead horse to me. It really feels like like beating a dead horse to me. There's this guy. I'm not supposed like something funny about for people who were involved in Gamergate. Like, there's a lot of big YouTubers and social media personalities out there who were involved in Gamergate, but nobody knows because they deleted their tweets several years ago, and nobody remembers that they were involved, and they got a bigger audience, and nobody knows it, and they sort of keep it secret or don't talk about it. And I know a guy who was involved in Gamergate, just like I was on the sidelines, who is now a really big like analyst of disinformation campaigns on social media, mainly Russian disinformation campaigns in Georgia and Ukraine and stuff like that. Built a career of analyzing social media patterns and behaviors. And you know, most people, the only people who I think got to somewhere out of it is the people who moved on, to be honest.
Well, that's probably true. The people who are still stuck on Gamergate 10 years later, uh, I'm not. I shouldn't say that. Some of them are like well put together people, but I think a lot of them too. They even they would tell you they spent way too much time on it. You know, they it consumed
Yeah.
such a massive portion of their life, if nothing else.
It turned into something really awful,
You think so?
especially when 2016. Yeah, I mean, what were people like me doing in 2016?
Well, you were
Like,
debating the alt right, or you were making anti-SJW videos. One of the
that
two.
was in 2017. That was 2017. 2016, the videos I made, I don't even remember half of them, but I do remember that some of my friends back then just basically made videos shitting on little girls uploading videos and how they were feminists. I luckily didn't do many of that because I never really liked the response video format. I always thought of it as sort of kind of gross. But I don't really look back at the content I made back then with sort of with a sense of positivity. I really don't.
Yeah, I do think that the anti-SJW community, like the YouTube community, like insofar as that ever existed, I think that they did. Like, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody. There's a lot of people. Some of them I don't have problems with at all. I think others basically just became culture warriors. Um,
Yeah.
but
Some got rich. Some people are really
some people did,
some
yes.
people some people really sort of baffle me to this day because you know Blaire White.
Yeah,
Like that entire like I was sort of friends with her back in 2016, very early when I still had a bigger channel than her. Um, I think her old videos are all gone, but if you happen to find some of her really old videos, she's far more articulate and far better researched than she is now. That bimbo personality that she puts on in her videos, that's an act. She's actually a really, really smart woman beneath all of that. And I don't understand some of these people. I really don't. Some of these people just really deliberately dumb down the content to just woke bad. Basically, that's all they do. Yeah.
thank you for watching another GamerGate book video segment. For 30 days, starting on December 9th, I'm running a Kickstarter campaign for this project, so please back the campaign for the people of Gamergate on Kickstarter or at gamergatebook.com. This project investigating and documenting the history of Gamergate from a variety of perspectives requires your support, and I appreciate it. Thank you.